Good morning, this is Rabbi Shlomo, first year Yeshiva Tsama Nafshi in Yerushalyim, HaKodesh, located in Avos in Yaakov number 6 in the Knesset of Chanukah Yeshivas, not too far from the central gas station. First of all, I want to welcome Matis Yao back from his trip in America. He was doing very important work for the Yeshiva, and we're very glad to have him back.
Amen. Thank you, Hashem.
Baruch Hashem indeed, Baruch Hashem. And this is the first year, usually starting about 9 o'clock, and we're learning Avos right now. Just to get a introduction at the beginning of the week, so we'll start a little bit fresh and then pick up where we left off with the Maharal in Prague on his Yerushalyim, the fourth Mishnah in the first parak, there at the Chaim, that's his parish. So first of all, just to get a concept of what we're discussing, we'll read the first few Mishnayos, the very beginning of the parak. Yaakov, maybe you want to read it for us?
From Moshe?
Yes, all right, we're ready to begin.
Moshe קיבל תורה מסיני, ומסרה ליהושע, ויהושע זקנים לנביאים, ונביאים מסרוה לאנשי כנסת הגדולה. הם אמרו שלושת דברים, הבו מתונים עדים, העמידו תלמידים הרבה, ועשו סייג לתורה.
So we first have to, in terms of the context of the Maharal that we'll be learning soon inside, we have to realize that the first chain of Kabbalah was obviously from Moshe to Yeshua, then from the singular transmission of Moshe to Yeshua, and then it was transferred to Yeshua singularly to the Zakanim, which is a plural group, and then to the Zakanim to the Nevi'im, which is also a plural group, then the Nevi'im to the Anshe Knesset, also to a group. And that at that point, then we can continue on Shimon and Tzaddik.
Shimon HaTzadik היה משרי כנסת הגדולה. הוא היה אומר על שלושת דברים, העולם עומד על התורה ועל העבודה ועל גמילות חסדים.
So that was Shimon HaTzadik, who was a singular individual, right? And he received the Kabbalah singularly from the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, and now he transferred it. Continue.
אנטיגונוס איש סוכו קיבל משמעון הצדיק. הוא היה אומר, אל תהיו כעבדים המשמשים את הרב על מנת לקבל פרס, אלא הבו כעבדים המשמשים את הרב שלא על מנת לקבל פרס. והיא מורה שמיים עליכם.
And as we can see inside, for the Maharal points out now, Antigonus received this singularly from Shimon HaTzadik, and Antigonus, as the Maharal is going to point out, gave it over to Yoshi ben Eliezer, right, and Yosef ben Yochanan. Those were the beginning of the Zugos, the pairs. And the Maharal is going to be explaining to us why there was a singular transfer up until this point, and then at this point there was a necessity for a bilateral, a double reception of the transmission, and then from that time and onward, a double transmission. Okay, one more Mishnah, and then we'll take a look at the Maharal inside.
יוסף בן יועזר איש צרדה, ויוסף בן יוחנן איש ירושלים קיבלו מהם. יוסף בן יועזר איש צרדה אומר, ויהי ביתך בית בד לחכמים, והווה מתאבק מעפר רגליהם, והווה שותה בצמא את דבריהם. יוסף בן יוחנן איש ירושלים אומר, יהי ביתך פתוח לרווחה, ויהיו עניים בני ביתך, ואל תרבה שיחה עם האישה.
Okay, we'll continue with that later on, and I don't know if we'll get to that this week. Okay, now let's take a look at what the Maharal says over here. Yeah, maybe take a look at this. Use this copy, because this copy has an addition that the earlier editions don't have. Rashi, would you like to go to the reading first? Starting here, you have in this edition, the Derek of Chaim.
Avos, Yosef ben Yoetzer Yisrael, Yosef ben Yochanan, Yisrael, Kvar Pirashim, Lama Lo Haya Gam Ken Zug Im Antigonus Israel, Kamo Shayazug, Mikavela.
So the morale, that'll be, and that what he explained previously will be the next paragraph, right? But he's coming to, he already explained why Antigonus received the Kabbalah singularly and not with a partner, whereas beginning with the two Yosis, Yossi ben Eliezer and Yossi ben Yochanan, they received it concurrently from Antigonus. So why was that? Why didn't Antigonus have a partner? Why didn't he have a pair? That's the next point in the Gemara. Go ahead.
Derech Chaim al Avos Bekal Ukach Antigonus Shabbat LaHazir Adam al Ha'ahava V'al Roi Lo Yeh Zug Imo Val Hazugo Shabo Acherehem Echad Min Hazug Hayabo Lehizayr al Maisa Sheyesh Bo Ahava Bilvad Sheni al Maisa Sheyesh Bo Yira Bilvad Moshi Yisrael Tamid Echad HaYimazir al Maisa Shel Ahava V'Asheni al Maisa Shel Bo Sheyesh Bo Ayira Pirish Zeh Nachon V'Od Yisrael.
Oh, okay, so very, very important to understanding at least the first parak here in Avos, where the zugos are enumerated and expounded in terms of what they taught. That the Maharal Miprag explains that Antigonus, since he spoke unilaterally on a unified message involving both Ava and Yira, so he received and transmitted the Kabbalah singularly. In contrast, with all the zugos to follow, they always received one a facet of the Kabbalah in Yira, and one a facet of the Kabbalah in Ava. Therefore, from all the zugos that follow, it'll be, and we're going to try and check this out as we go along. This will be one of the first things we're going to be trying to use as a tool of analysis. Right? There's a tremendous insight into how to understand what the different zugos are saying and from what direction they're coming. Right? So as we spent time on just to do a bit chazorah, where we spent when Antigonus made his statement that we came to the conclusion that you should be as servants that are serving the Rav Shelo Almanachas Kalmukras. That's an aspect of Ava, to do something gratuitously, out of simple Ava, and more Shemayim Aleichem. That's obviously going to be an aspect of Yira. So he said this both concurrently and equally. He gave that over to Yossi ben Eliezer and Yossi ben Yochanan. They, however, when it came time for them to transfer to the generations following them, they gave an individual separate aspect of Ava or an aspect of Yira. And the reason for this is going to be now explained further in the Maharal. Let's continue further in the Maharal.
The eighth of Kol HaMekavlim Shizachar Hayu Shnayim Yossi ben Yoezer Ish straight of Yossi ben Yochanan Ish Yerushalyim Bechein Hazugos Ha'acher Ein Lomar Klal Shahya Davar Zeh B'Mikra Zeh Kasher
Oh, so don't think this is a random thing. When you're learning the Mishnayos, don't think this just happened to be something which was the way it was written over, the way it seemed to happen, that there was no reasoning for this, that there was a happenstance, it was a random occurrence that this occurred. No, there's a specific reason why this occurred, as we're going to go into details and explain.
Zeh Kasher Ha'isa Kabbalah Va'av Mizeh Min Moshe Liyoshua Miyashua Lezekeni Kami Lo Hayu Mekavlim Ha'achromim B'Madrega Kamo HaRishonim.
So first of all, the Maharal, as we mentioned last week, he goes into the Mitzias to remind us of the fact there's such a process as Yeridas Hadoros. Right? Yeridas Hadoros, that the generations that came after the earlier ones were on a necessarily lower level in different aspects. Whatever those aspects are is a separate discussion, but there was a difference in the level of the previous generations to the latter generations.
Ach ein roi labod ha-Kabbalah min anshi knesset gedola ela zugos mibnei shehem rechokim zeh mizeh.
Meaning the question is, he's basically asking is, why didn't the Kabbalah begin from the Anshe Knesset Gedola directly to Zugos? Right? Give it over directly to Zugos. Why did it have to first go to Shimon Tzadik? than to Antigonus, right? Could have gone perhaps just maybe you could have had a pair of Zugos, Shimon Tzadik and Antigonus. As we mentioned before, the previous source we had, that was I think the Tashbats. 1 second, let me just refresh my memory. That that Antigonus was Israel. Kibbutz Mehem did on the first page. You have there the Tiferes Israel. That was the why they couldn't learn together from both of them. One minute. I want to say he's a Rosh Medaber. He was a Rosh Medaber for Shimon and Tzadik.
Was it like in a boat?
No, sorry. It's Tashbats. Yeah, you have the Tashbats just above the Maral. You have about 4 lines. The Tashbats is the first source. About 4 lines from the bottom. Ulai Antigonus, Avos Sholom Hayarosh Dibra, the Shimon and Tzadik, right? The Kabbalah Sataminim Hayayotzis Misayim Mitravayu, right? So you see the Tashbats is giving a possible explanation, right? That Antigonus, since he was the Rosh, he was like the Targumim for Shimon and Tzadik, and also that he also ended up, and then with the Kabbalah was given to Messiah, concluded with both of them, right? It could have been that's why the Lashon was, as we discussed, that was last week's, the week before last, that in the early part of the week, why it was Mehem and not Menu. But so you see that it could have been a possibility that Shimon Tzadik and Antigonus could have been considered a pair, right? So the Maral is basically explaining that wouldn't have been possible. That wouldn't have been possible to suggest that if we want to make a zug, that Anshi Knesset Gedula pass it over to a zug, that Anshi Knesset Gedula would have been over to Shimon Tzadik and Antigonus, that wouldn't have been possible because it was too far a distance in time between the two periods. I mean, this is a part of his explanation why it wasn't random. There wasn't a random chance that the Zugas came into the transmission and the Masorah of Klal at the time they did. Meaning, they had to be distant enough from the Anshi Knesset Gedolim. Meaning, had it been that they received a dual transmission from the Anshi Knesset Gedolah, it would have been inappropriate. Because as he said originally, if Av and Yira, they have to be transferred. Up until the time of Antigonus, it was transferred always unilaterally. It was given in a unified message. At the time of the Zugos, it had to be diverse. Right? That time period hadn't come until years later, after the end of the Anshi Knesset Gedolah. Right? So you had to wait. Let's continue. Ein roy lebo kabel yeah.
Nafshi Knesset Gedola, El Zugos B'nei Shehem Rechokim Zedin Ki Zugos Ba'avur Shehem Zug, V'hayis HaKabbalah B'yad Echad Mehem Rak B'shneim Yachad. Ve'eino Dome L'Zikenim Neviim Af Ki Hem Hayu Rabim Hayisa HaKabbalah Eitzel Kol Echad Ve'echad Mehem.
Oh, this is an important point. The entire Kabbalah came from Moshe Rabbeinu to Yeshua to the Zakanim. Each one of the Zakanim received the entire Kabbalah in its full entirety, right, from Yeshua. And each one stood as an individual, but they were considered to be a group Zakanim, right? After Zakanim, they gave it over to the Nevi'im. Likewise, each one of the Nevi'im received the tradition, right, from the Nevi'im in its entirety, each individually in its entirety. They also, the Nevi'im, gave it to the Anshe Knesset Gadol, and even though they were a rabbi, they were a group, they received it each individual, right, entirely and fully, right? Now, what happens at the point of the transmission from Shimon and Tzaddik and onward?
Sorry, lo nizkaru kama hayu hazakinim ukama hayu hanavim. Shetomar shahayit hakabbalah biyad kulam biyachad kmo shezachar hazug b'shmam. Zemora ki eitzel shneihem biyachad hayisa Torah.
See, just as when we mention a zug, between the two partners of the pair, the whole Kabbalah was within their understanding and their comprehension and their transmission. Right? Likewise, in the same way, the Nevi'im had it completely, absolutely each individual. Likewise, the Anshe Knesset Gadol had it equally and entirely each individual. Okay? The whole Kabbalah.
הזקנים והנביאים והאנשי כנסת הגדול לא הזכיר בשמם לכך פירושו שאצל כל אחד ואחד הייתה הקבלה של תורה.
Since it wasn't mentioned, what do we think this means? What's it dependent upon the fact if you mention Hezkim B'Shmam? What's there's a difference between, so you had Moshe to Yeshua, so okay, that's obvious. Moshe had to receive the Torah from Sinai, that's obvious, and he gave it obviously to Yeshua. Then it wasn't mentioned the Zakanim, it wasn't mentioned the Nevi'im, and it wasn't mentioned the Anshe Knesset. There was no mention of their names. What does it seem to be important? What's the significance if you're mentioning the name or not? Right?
מזה היה מותר שנתנו לאנשי כנסת הגדול בלושן רבים הבו נתונים וכן מוסר אנטיגנס אל תביאו כעבדים וכולי אילו מוסר הזוגות בלושן יחיד יהי ביסך וכולי.
Okay, so at this point, the Moral is making a dig in the way that the transmission was given over. Right? That the Musar that the Anshe Knesset Gadol gave over B'Lashon Rabbi, Nesunim B'Din, Ma'amidi Talmidi Harbe, right? Osa Sayeg the Torah. That's a Lashon Rabbi. That, as we said, that's a directive, that's a command in Lashon Rabbi, right? And V'chein Musa Antigonus, he said in Lashon Rabbi, Lo Tihaka Vadim, right? It didn't say singular. Don't be like an Evid. That is Misham Shenesaraf Rav Almanas L'Kabbalah. It says Lo Kava Adim, right? If you take a look at the inside here, you'll see that's a big change in the way that the Mishnayos is being presented to us. That's a deal that we should be making. One of the tremendous things about the Maharal is, aside from the tremendous. Good morning, Rami. Good to see you. How are you today? Maharal Mishran. We're just discussing. When you look at the Mishnayos in Pirkei Avos, if you want page 391, there's the Mishnayos there in the Siddur. There's a difference between the Lashonos that the Anshe Knesset Gadol used and Antigonus Isupa used. Right? Now what is that? For example, he says here that the Anshe Knesset Gadol said three things. Hayim Rasunim Bedin, that's Lashon plural. Amidiu Talmidim Harbi, that's Lashon plural. Asusai the Torah, that's Lashon plural. Shimon and Tzaddik Hayim Yishai Sheikh Knesset the Torah, who are Omer, he said Al Shosh Divine or Omer. He gave information, right? It wasn't a directive, right? So it was simply information. But if you now go to Antigonus, what did Antigonus, what way, what style, so what nusach did Antigonus use? Antigonus is Socho Kibul Mishimon and Tzaddik, who are Omer, he said, he was able to say, Al Tiyuka Vadim. Hamisham Esarav Almanas L'Kabel Pras. He spoke in the Lashon Rabbi. He didn't say don't be like an Evid who serves as Rav Almanas L'Kabel Pras. He said don't be like a Vadim, right? And rather you should be like a Vadim Hasham Shemes Rav Shalom Almanas Pras. V'hayamur Shemayim Aleichem, Aleichem, not upon you, right? Now when it comes to, right, Yossi ben Yezer, Yossi ben Yochanan, Yerushalyim, Kibu Mehem, Yossi ben Eliezer, East Straight Omer, Hayu Beisecha. He said your house. He didn't say your batim. He said your house, right? Right? He's speaking, right? Hayu Nesabik Babu Ragleim, Hayu Shosu B'Tzama Devrekim. He's speaking Lashon Rabbi, right? Excuse me, he's speaking Lashon Yochid. So there's a tremendous change in the way that the transmission of the Kabbalah was given over. In the earlier generations, by Anshe Knesset Gedola and Shimon and Tzaddik, it was given over the Kabbalah in a Lashon Rabbi. Right? At the time when Yossi ben Eliezer and Yossi ben Yochai were giving over the transmission of traditions of Torah, they were giving it over in a Lashon Yochid. They're talking to each individual individually, even though they might have been talking to a rabbin, but they were talking to individuals. Earlier than that, they were talking to individuals as well, obviously, but they were talking in Lashon Rabbin. Why? What's that indicative? What's the point behind that? Right? So that's what the Maral Mitzrayim is explaining over here. Let's just back up and say over here that Avos Zakeni, let's have that paragraph. Rachmi, we want to pick up from that paragraph. We want that paragraph. Avol Hazakeni on the Vim Anshe Knesset Gedola. Lo Hizkish B'Shmam. It wasn't mentioned. Their names were never mentioned. It was mentioned just the group that they belonged to, but their names never were mentioned. Right?
So the Kash Pirusho She'etzu Kolech Havech HaYis Kabbalah Shel Torah. It said, I am no certain Nasnu Anshe Knesset Gedola Lashon Rabbi Avu Misuni.
Oh, so since it was a group, they received the Kabbalah, the traditions as a group, and they were speaking as a group. So therefore, the transmission, as it was written down in the Mishnayos, was given over to Lashon Rabbi. Okay.
Musar Antigonus, Al Tihiwa Ka'avodim V'Chulei Musar Hazugos V'Lashon Yachid Yiveischa.
But the Zugos, right? The Zugos, as the Maral explained just a few moments or paragraphs ago, that the Zugos, that they were now receiving the Kabbalah as individuals, not as a group, and they were giving it over individually, that between the pair, between the two partners, they had the complete Kabbalah, but they each one had either an aspect of Yira, Avos Hashem, to serve Hashem in a way of loving Hashem, and the other partner was giving over the Mesurah in a aspect of Yira, out of awe and respect from HaKodesh Baruch Hu. So, but together they represented the whole transmission. But individually they were giving only over one aspect of the two aspects of Yira or Avra of the transmission. So therefore it was going from they couldn't speak as a unified group anymore, and they did not speak to a unified group anymore. Therefore, they spoke in a Lashon Yachid, and they were talking to Yechidim, to individuals. So they're all there. Hayu Beisecha, your house should be like this. You should do like this. Not that it should be something general in terms of a group, because they were no longer giving it over to a group as a whole set of individuals. They were giving it to a group, but each individual was having to receive the Kabbalah individually. But then it was only going to be certain aspects of the Kabbalah. Each individual would not be able to receive the whole Kabbalah individually as it existed by the times of the Anshe Knesset Gedola and previous to that time as well. Let's go a few more lines, and then we'll have to stop for the next year, but we'll go a few more lines. Let's just see. Okay.
Ki lo simsa acher ito. Lefichach amar b'loshen rabbi. Moshu nechshav k'mo rabbi. ולזוגות שלא היה אחד מהם לבד ולא היה הכל, לא אמר בלושן רבים, רק בלושן יחיד, כמו שהיה יחיד.
אבל, again, just to repeat, הזוגות שלא היה אחד מהם לבד, meaning there was no one that was by himself. And he was not the whole entirety of it either, right? לא אומר בלושן רבי, he couldn't speak in לשון רבי, רק only in a לשון of יחיד. כמו שהיה, just like he was a yachid, right? He had to express it over as a singular and not a plural message. Maybe anta.
הפרש גדול יש בין אנשי כנסת גדול לבין הזוגות. אנשי כנסת גדול היה להם שם בפני עצמם וגם היו רבים ולא היה כאן קבלה
Muchalekes, right?
ולפיכך אין סבור הכלל בוא הקבלה מן אנשי כנסת הגדולה אל הזוגות.
This is okay. We'll stop. Repeat again. This is the answer to his question. The basic question that the Maharal was asking. One of them was why couldn't it go directly from the Anshi Knesset Gadol to the Zugos, right? You had from the Anshi Knesset Gadol you had to Shimon Tzadik, and from Shimon Tzadik you went to Antigonus, and from Antigonus then you started giving the transmission over to the Zugos. Question is why couldn't it go directly from the Anshi Knesset Gadol to Zugos? The answer is, let's just take a look again. After those, meaning the Anshe Knesset Gadol, you didn't find any groups after the Anshe Knesset Gadol. The Fikah Amar B'Loshen Rabbi, therefore they spoke in a Loshen Rabbi, right? And each one had to speak therefore in a Loshen Yachid after that time. What's the difference? They were all individuals. They had each member of the Anshe Knesset Gedolah was an individual, right? But he was also a part of the Rabbi, part of the group, right? Meaning there was a full, entire reception of the traditions in each individual, and it was that individuality of the entire Kabbalah coming to each individual existed within the context of a whole group, right? So a group of individuals received the whole Kabbalah in its entirety. Similarly, very much to say Klal Yisrael at Tar Sinai, at least the first two dibros, each individual of Klal Yisrael received the first two dibros directly, entirely from HaKodesh Torah. Right? It wasn't that one heard this, one heard that. Everyone heard the same thing. Likewise, everyone heard and received the same thing. Right? There's no reason why it could come, right? It could not come, the Kabbalah, from Anshe Knesset Gedolah to Zugos. Why is that? Each individual of the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, for example, had in its entirety the tradition of both Ava and Yira to HaKodesh Baruch Hu. That existed as a singular message. And each individual in Anshe Knesset Gedolah had that complete message to give over. Right? So, how could you give that message to Zugos? A Zug, by its definition, by a pair, one gets a half and one gets the other half. Right? One gets an aspect of Ava and one gets an aspect of Yira. Right? So a person who has the complete Kabbalah, unified, can't give it to two individuals because how is it going to be split? It was only until you had Antigonus. Antigonus we finally had that Antigonus himself, he made the split. He spoke about Yira and he spoke about Ava. So once Antigonus made the split, now that dual message can be transferred to two individuals. But a singular message couldn't be given over to two individuals. Because the fact that they were Zugos pairs was indicative of the fact that they weren't capable, for some whatever reasons, that they weren't capable at that point to receive the whole thing. If they can't receive the whole thing, you can't give the whole thing to both of them. Because if you leave the whole thing to both of them, you may get nothing out of it, right? You have to be able to somehow to split it up. So Antigonus, at his point in time, he split it up, and at that point, that was the beginning of the Zugos. We're going to stop here. We'll go over this last point tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem. We'll chazer over this last point, and we'll continue with the moral until we finish it, Mitzvah Shem, tomorrow.